Hey, what's up, guys? This is the 21st video in my series on studying JavaScript. Today I got about 7 hours completed of studying, and it was a mix of many different things. Uh, there was some very interesting stuff that I uncovered just kind of through random exploration today, which I do sometimes. But if I start from the beginning of the day, I started with studying MDN, and I did a little bit of a different exercise, and I'll explain it like why the motivation was. The different exercise was I looked at there's four main sections of interest for me right now on MDN, and those are JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and web APIs. And if you go on each one of those pages, there's a bunch of different follow-up links that you can traverse to get more information. Now, the problem with a lot of these links is that they're either really simple information that you don't really need to repeat anymore, um, or they're not really that significant information in the sense of it's not that important for you to really have a very high resolution understanding of it. Now, of course, this might change as I get deeper and deeper into this entire experience. I might realize, like, actually some of these links did have really good information. But basically, sometimes, I guess what I'm saying is the exercise that I did was I looked at the sidebar and I tried to select the articles or the sections that seemed most significant, like most likely to be of use to me, and I clicked on those. And I found that really only a few of the ones that were on that sidebar actually seemed like they might be high utility, especially when I was looking at JavaScript. That said, I did make pretty good progress on. I thought it was a pretty good exercise. I think I'm going to do it again tomorrow. I really only got JavaScript going with it, but I want to do it with HTML and CSS as well. So, what else did I do? Well, I didn't get to looking at the ECMAScript specification at all, but I did take a look through the CSS W3 specification and for basically Flex and Grid. And honestly, there's two other ones that I started looking at: Display and Position. And obviously my goal is to become the best programmer I possibly can be, and this is mostly because I want to create things, but also because in 2021 it kind of seems like this is the best thing to choose. There are many different options, and I constantly keep coming back to, well, programming, you can just do the most with the least, which is really applicable to me. But yeah, so these W3 documents are clearly important. I'm starting to see references to them in more things like source code, and other resources. So they're like the RFCs, but of the browser in JavaScript. And yeah, I guess like some responsibilities on the web have been passed to different entities, right? Like network protocols seem to have been captured in the RFC land, whereas browser implementations and file specifications, that's what I would consider HTML, but I guess it's not a file, so to speak. It's more of just it's a format of data, right? It can be a file, it doesn't have to be at all. But that landed in a different territory. So anyways, I was going through going through them very high level again. I've said this in some of my other videos, but most of my videos are probably going to be having new viewers, if anyone at all. And so I'll explain. The way that I study a lot of the time is, I don't know, it's like I don't, I kind of skim things a lot, right? I'm constantly skimming. But part of this is because, you know, like, computer science has so much information. I think I would make the argument, and I wouldn't be able to really speak with any I don't know about other fields, but my gut feel is that computer science has by far the most information up to date. Even though it's the youngest field, when you compare it to physics and other disciplines that are quite complicated, it still has already eclipsed them in terms of information. And I think that this has a lot to do with the fact that it's unbounded in the information it can create that is necessary for humans to understand, if only momentarily, so that they can forever encode it for machines to do forever, right? But they still have to understand it like for a second while they're programming that machine level automation, right? And so that's kind of like just you know um, secondary thought. But something that was interesting is, as I was getting deeper into some of these other things like CSS and JavaScript, I just decided to go on a deep dive into the DOM, right? And the DOM is like one of these things. Everybody knows the word, everybody knows maybe like 3 or 4 things it could say about it. Depending on the person, that number just increases, right? I have to have a very good understanding of the DOM, and it is pretty complicated. Some of the first questions you ask yourself is like, where does the code that actually provides the DOM interface exist? What's funny is it's quite possible there are tons of front-end developers that have, to this day, not really answered this question beyond the browser. And of course, yeah, everybody knows that the browser provides the DOM interface. But how and where? What is the library for the browser? Can you see that? Um, and how do you know that it's implementing the specifications that are in the W3 documents, right? So I started going deeper into this, right? I was looking at the DOM, and one of the great ways to actually do like a depth first search into a subject, right? I guess I'll say this. Usually I do breadth first, because I'm trying to figure out what's the most ubiquitous things. So I look at an environment and I just try and pick up what's the most ubiquitous. And this is exactly what happened. The DOM is extremely ubiquitous. It's extremely important in web development, and therefore I decided that it was time to do a depth first search or research into the DOM, right? And the way that I do this is similar. I do breadth first, but all targeting the DOM, which means I look at like as many different resources as I can about the DOM, different perspectives on it, and I try and reconcile them, cross compare them, right? So a good example of this is MDN has like 3 main pages on the DOM that are high level. It has a bunch of other things, but 3 main pages. And so I looked through all of them. The next thing I did is I looked at Wikipedia, and I looked at its DOM. Wikipedia is great because it oftentimes links to other resources that you can follow. Now, I don't know that I use that so much, but it's always good. I use it for some things. So anyways, I read through the Wikipedia DOM article as well, compared some of that to the MDN one. Interesting note, there's literal copied information between the two of those. The next document I looked at was the WhatWG spec for the DOM. And this is a very technically thick and dense document. So I couldn't actually read through it, obviously. It's the same approach that I take with all of these documents. I have to scan it and try and get like a lay of the land first and go through it slowly, iteratively with spaced repetition, and not overload my brain too much. But yeah, then what I did was I started asking more questions. The first thing I searched was like, I knew that V8 had a lot to do with how programs ran in Chrome, right? So I was like, maybe the DOM is in V8. This was completely wrong, right? And for those that don't know, V8 is an interpreter for JavaScript. That's it. It doesn't do any of these Web API DOM-based things that are in the browser. So I realized that, and then I was like, well, I really don't know where this is originating. So then I started trying to look for open source browser code. That's when I found Chromium, which is mirrored on GitHub. and one of the largest projects, if not the largest project I've ever really examined. After looking through Chromium source code for probably an hour and a half or so, just trying to find where a reference to the DOM is, I noticed that there was the main reference to it was in this one thing under third party. Uh, it's pretty top level. I think it's like literally in the Chromium project under third party, under Blink, under core, under renderer, or maybe it's renderer core. But in any event, it's under Blink. Inside of Blink is the DOM code, which is obviously in C++, because that's what most of the stuff in Chromium is. But it was very interesting because like I had no idea there was all these different things related with basically just the browser. The browser is an extremely complicated program, probably the most complicated program that I've ever seen. Maybe like the Linux OS is more complicated. I would have to compare those two, but very, very intimidating piece of body of code, right? Anyways, though, it's very cool that I could finally find that and kind of piece everything together. So I know where the native process that sandboxes all of the web-based, JavaScript front ends that we make exists now. I know where that does, and that's big. That's like a really important thing. I try and connect. There's this saying, which is where the rubber meets the road. But this happens over and over again in computer science, where it's like, where your competency stops, and vaguely, like the browser, to go back to the original thing I was saying before, we're like, well, we know when we call document.title and then we set it to something in JavaScript that it's going to this API that is provided by the browser, right? So we've reduced all of this complexity, so much of it, to just a single word, which is browser. We don't really know where that code is. We don't even know like how it works, blah, blah, blah. And what you do is you draw the line from here, the JavaScript, to here, which is Chromium Blink, which is a browser engine used by many different browsers that's related to WebKit, probably, but I would have to double check that. But anyways, then you realize that this thing in the middle, which is what what WG, the spec for the DOM is, and what MDN is saying, what Wikipedia, all of these things that are talking about the interface between the DOM and web APIs, between the browser and your sandboxed JavaScript-based program with HTML and CSS, all of that is basically implemented here and used over here, right? And that is like, I can say for sure I was missing this piece for sure. Blink, Chromium, nada. I didn't even know the word, and this is where this is where it's possible, if you don't have the approach that I have, that you never even encounter that, or you encounter it like 5 or 6 years later or something insane, because that's how computer science works. Like, if you don't find something, you may never find it, right? It's just crazy how deeply complicated and mature projects become all over the world, distributed, separated, and isolated from each other. So anyways, this video has gone on for long enough. The last thing I did was, after looking into Chromium, I looked deeper into that Odyssey video hosting website, which is built on top of the distributed blockchain technology of Library, or LBRY. And I realized, like, there's some really good source code there. First of all, they have their front end, which also is a desktop application using Electron and JavaScript, open source. So I'm going to be reading that. And they also have a Python SDK, which is like interacting with, I think, the blockchain itself, which is super cool, which I'm going to also consume. Both of those are both 3 megabytes, which, if you know me, I've talked about how you can basically only read 3 megabytes a week if you're reading hours of code a day at a fixed speed. So those two projects alone would take probably 2 weeks to consume. And that's a lot of time. I'm reading a bunch of other stuff too, right? I'm basically just completely overwhelmed with information between specifications and code, and it's just completely overwhelming. But some other documentation that was recommended by the library protocol, or just the library site or whatever, they have a protocol specification, which is going to be awesome to read because I'm actually more comfortable with that than a lot of the stuff I've been talking about because it's network, and I've studied, RFCs with network a lot. And then you have BitTorrent and Bitcoin. Both of those are also going to be technical behemoths. Every one of these things, this is what the internet is becoming. They're all just these huge hyper objects that are like, it could take a single person weeks or months to even like start to scratch the surface of some of these things. Like a normal person, it could take them months. Like I'm someone who is sacrificing so much of my life and committing it all and putting it all on the line for this, like some of these singular things, with the hope that comprehension leads to something meaningful, right? But, we don't really know that. And it's becoming untenable for regular human beings. Like, I worry about that, right? Because the information is growing just insanely. How are, say I had a kid and they were learning about web development, and we had another 20 years of complexity added on top of everything we've already done, right? I don't know that they could do it. Like, eventually human beings' entire lives will go by before they can read everything they needed to read. So they will be operating. I really feel like this is a problem that I'm kind of trying to figure out now. How do I act intelligently when I can't possibly understand things? It's like a different type of strategy. I've always tried to understand stuff as much as possible, but you can't read 30 million lines of code ever. So your strategy can't be built around understanding that, in that sense at least. Is there a different way you could understand it? Is there some? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure this out. So anyways, that's basically everything that happened today. It was a pretty good day. 7 hours study, day 21. I'm going to keep going. I'm almost at 130 hours total. Obviously, I'm going to probably be doing this unless something drastically changes in my life until like 1,000 hours. I know I haven't really said that. That's kind of, I might switch, right? It's probably not going to be JavaScript. It's probably going to be more like Python. I might start a couple different tracks so that I can maybe collect everything, but it's going to be computer science nevertheless. So for those of you that are watching, thanks for watching and coming along this journey where I try and basically, wrestle the chaos and overwhelming complexity of the modern internet. And as I usually say, control your focus. Don't let it get hijacked by anything. And go check out my blog if you want to. Doesn't really matter. There are more important things to do probably, but I did improve my blog. I said I was going to update the pictures, and they do look better. And eventually, after I get through this huge study session, eventually I'll come back and radically improve everything I've been working on. But thanks for watching. Drop a comment on any of the different platforms that you may see this. And take care of yourself. Peace.